What's up, everybody? Welcome in to the Vegas Nation Fan Zone. I'm Adam Hill, Raiders reporter, here to answer any questions you guys might have. What is going on with the Raiders right now? Obviously, the season in terms of postseason possibilities has come to an end, but they still have a game to play. They still have some things to work on, some things to find out about the roster as well as they close the season out in Denver this weekend. So if you guys have any questions about the team and what's going on, what you want to watch for in this last week, shoot them over right now. You can always post them up on Twitter through the Vegas Nation page. Also, fire them in this YouTube link as well. Whatever you want to do, send your questions over throughout the week, and then somebody from our staff, either myself, Vinny Bonsignor, Heidi Fang, Sam Gordon, one of us will come in here each week and answer all of your questions. We got a couple that were lined up on Twitter. Let's get into some of them first as we jump into your end of the season Raiders questions. The first one, do you feel that the weekly issues of players on the COVID list is a sign of Gruden's lack of team discipline and he has lost the locker room? No, I don't think it's that easy. I don't think you can just point that out and say, hey, this is going on. This is happening in several locations around the league, right? I mean, we've seen a massive outbreak with the Titans. They were in a position where they had to move games back around and they couldn't play for a while. They had their whole team. They had an illegal practice off site. That's a team that's going to the playoffs, or very well could be going to the playoffs this week. So the Ravens had a multitude of issues, and they've come back from that and been really, really good. Um, these things are happening around the league, and I think that there was concerns about how the Raiders were handling a lot of their protocols for sure, because they just weren't doing a very good job at times. But they're not alone, and I think you saw some teams that had protocol issues kind of fall apart. Some teams were able to thrive anyway, but really, there's not been a team that hasn't been affected in some way by COVID-19 this year. And so I don't want to read too much into, hey, the Raiders had a bunch of issues. They clearly don't respect Gruden. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's fair at all to go in there. Listen, Las Vegas as a community, we have struggled. We've had, really, really high positivity rates, and guys are part of this community. And so, yes, there was some protocol issues, and the Trent Brown situation was kind of a disaster because it wasn't just him; it was him not wearing a mask and not wearing a tracker and being around all the other guys, and like that was a really bad blunder by the organization. But let's not pretend like the Raiders are the only team. And even with their Darren Waller situation, they had a foundation dinner. It was a fundraiser. It was for a very good cause, and they took a lot of heat for it. But they did go through a lot of steps to try to be somewhat safe that night. They just had a couple of slip ups, and it was, hey, we are going to be going to this thing. We're going to be in a separate room. We're not going to be around the public. We're all going to wear masks. And then all of a sudden, you want to give a jersey to somebody, and you, without your mask on, go over and shake the person's hand, and that's a massive violation, and you have to be penalized for it. But at the same time, you kind of understand where that comes from. Other teams have had situations like, you know, the haircut situations, the Deshaun Watson restaurant opening situation. Like teams have had issues everywhere. So let's not pretend it's just the Raiders. That's not to excuse the Raiders' complete lack of discipline in the COVID protocols at times, but let's not pretend like they're alone. Mark Davis, is Mark Davis planning on evaluating the coach and GM job performance, or is he just counting all the money the city and fans gave him? Well, it seems like a very pointed question. There's kind of an edge to that one, I suppose. Um, Listen, I think Mark Davis evaluates all aspects of the organization every single year. This year is somewhat different because it was so crazy. There was so much chaos and um, periphery stuff going on with moving and going through COVID and everything else that was going on in the world. This is a very, very crazy year, but he will still evaluate everything. And I think from a personnel perspective, on the John Gruden situation, John Gruden is the coach if he wants to be the coach. So will he evaluate it? Maybe. I guess if you say at the end of every year, we take stock of all parts of the organization, then sure, that's an evaluation. But John Gruden's contract is such that if he wants to be the coach, he will be the coach. I wouldn't look at that in any other way besides that. That's that's his decision to make whether he wants to coach or not. On the Mac side, a little bit different. But I don't think that I think as long as John Gruden is happy with Mayock and that pairing is working out, then they'll be okay in that regard. I think it'll be more John Gruden making the decision there than Mark Davis. But that's the bottom line to watch is that John Gruden is the coach of this team as long as he wants to be the coach of this team, kind of no matter what happens out there. So the evaluation processes will happen, especially with personnel and all aspects of the organization. Last year they made some changes on the in terms of assistant coaches. This year, obviously, they'll have a new defensive coordinator, or it'll be Rob Marinelli getting the job full time. But they've already made that move with the defensive coordinator, so that would certainly be evaluated. So there's a lot of evaluations that go on, whether even if you're talking about a coach coming back and retaining his job. But I think it's important to know that I've seen some fire John Gruden stuff. First of all, ridiculous, but second of all, it's just not feasible, not practical with a contract like John Gruden's to say fire him. It's going to be his job, and I'm not necessarily saying that he's done anything to warrant getting fired. We know the old days of the Raiders, and when Al Davis was around, you could certainly make the case that you'd be moving on from a coach that did make the playoffs for 3 years. But it's a new world and a new contract situation, certainly for John Gruden. So no, don't watch for anything like that to happen. Don't even start thinking about it. Kind of silly at this point. Does Mark Davis see the tweets from Raider Nation? Um, and I'm assuming you're meaning the fans, not our Vegas Nation stuff here. But yeah, from Raider Nation fans. That's a good question. I'll actually ask Mark this next time I talk to him. I don't believe that he's a social media guy in terms of just being on all the time and checking things out. But I've also been very surprised, working in the sports world and covering a lot of coaches and front offices and things like that over the last few years. Very surprised at how many people say they're not social media people, but are. That they're, I don't go on social media. I don't know anything about that world, and they read every single tweet that's out there. So I don't think at all. I would definitely bet against Mark Davis being a social media guy, but you just never know. So that is something I can check with him next time I speak with him if he does. Not that he'll necessarily tell the truth, but we'll find out where he stands on the social media world. We'll get into some more topics about the last game of the season coming up against Denver, and maybe what there is kind of to evaluate and play for. I'll get into that in a minute, but we have a couple more questions here from Twitter. Is John Gruden saying he didn't regret not going for the touchdown indicative of a weak leader who can't own his own mistakes? No. No. I have a lot of issues with, maybe not a lot of issues is maybe not fair, but there's plenty of things to criticize John Gruden for, I think, throughout, his tenure. A lot of it is being overly conservative at times. If you look this season, the Raiders are going to have the most field goal attempts inside of 30 yards of any team in the last 30 years. That to me is troubling. I'm never a settle for field goal guy. I think teams should go for first downs far more often. But listen, he's conservative by nature. He's old school by nature. We understand what John Gruden is as a coach. He's been flexible. I think the last game they went for it on a couple of fourth downs and short. They've been effective on fourth down this year for sure. But I would just go for it a little bit more often. I don't think field goals are what wins you games in the NFL, but it's not. It's also not the offense. The offense has been pretty good all season long. They've just stalled out in the red zone on occasion. So let's put that part aside. Let's just get into last week and the end of the game and what everybody's saying. So the question again Is John Gruden saying he doesn't regret not going for the touchdown indicative of a weak leader who can't own his own mistakes? That would assume that there was a mistake. I'm not ready to assume that. I do believe on third down they should have gone for it. But I don't think there's much debate. First and second down, you should not be scoring a touchdown. You shouldn't. You should stop. And I thought that what they did was appropriate. First down, Josh Jacobs decides to kind of slide down around the 5. Second down, Josh Jacobs slides down at the 1 when the Dolphins were trying to get him to go into the end zone. Third down is where the decision is to be made. And in retrospect, I think John Gruden probably does think, below the surface, he probably should have gone for the touchdown. I do think he should have gone for it on third down. I think he should have tried to punch it in, because what happens if you don't punch it in, if you don't score, you just get the result that you got anyway. You run the clock, and then you kick the field goal. And actually, you might have run another second or two off if you run a play instead of taking a knee. But I think the worst really that can happen, besides a fumble, which he certainly was worried about, the worst that can really happen is you get stopped if they try to tackle you, which I don't think they would have. And then you have to kick the field goal anyway after running the clock down. So yes, I think you do go for it there on third down. What he said was, "Hey, we had the Kansas City game in our minds. We left Kansas City too much time. They went down and scored. Could we trust the defense to get a stop?" Totally fair, I think. That's a totally fair point that he makes. That do you trust the defense to stop a team if they have over a minute? It's much more likely that you stop a team that has 19 seconds and no timeouts, as the situation the Raiders were in. Bottom line is the mistake really wasn't on the offensive side. It was the defense allowing a wide open receiver and then grabbing a face mask. I think those are the things that were really the problems. And yes, I do think they should have gone for a touchdown on the third down play, but it wasn't wrong to stop on first down and second down. It just wasn't. That's what you have to do. You have to give your team the best chance to win. They gave themselves like a 99% chance to win by doing that, and that 1% didn't come through. But the coach's job is to give your team the best chance to win, and that's the situation that John Gruden put his team in, and they weren't able to close the door. There's only so much you can do as a coach. He, I think, made the decisions he thought were right at the time. I would stand by them for the most part, except for the third down play. And you have to live with those decisions. And I'm sure in the future, think about what happened and figure out if you want to do the same strategy next time. Those things are all true. But yeah, it's that's a tough spot. Now, I will point out, and we haven't talked about this enough, I know, but the real problem of that last drive was drawing the Dolphins offside on the third down play. So think back to what the situation was. 3rd and 1, minute 55 left. Miami has 1 timeout. The Raiders had not converted a third down the entire game, right? 0 for 10 on third down. So they'd struggled in that situation. But 3rd and 1 with the Raiders, running game being somewhat stagnant, but it's been effective in terms of getting 3rd and 4th and short. And you line up, you expect to get the first down there, and then the Dolphins are gonna have to use their final timeout. But what did the Raiders do? They drew the Dolphins offside. They went hard count. They went Alec Ingold motion that really threw off the front of the defense. They jumped offside. You get the first down. In the moment, you think that's a great play. You're celebrating. You're happy if you're the Raiders. Hey, picked up the first down. Now you can run the clock. But what it did was it allowed them to get the first down without Miami having to use their timeout. Now Miami gets to use their timeout after the first down play instead of after the third down play. And so instead of using the timeout there, they get to save it. Now they call timeout after the first down. Now the Raiders can only run it down to 19 seconds instead of running it all the way down to 0 or 2 seconds, 3 seconds to kick the field goal. So that offside really changed the math and changed the equation of the entire last couple of minutes of the game. So that's one of those that you just look back and say, in the moment, you thought it was a great move. You thought it was a great play. You're excited. Instead, turns out that it works out against you. See some of the comments here up on YouTube. Ricky said fire Gruden. I think we already got into the fact that is not going to happen and shouldn't. Gruden should be under fire more than Mayock. Play calling cost him at least 3 or 4 games. I don't know if that's true. Listen, the offense has been really, really good this season. And I think that, we get carried away with, well, they scored enough points, and they did. Uh, there was times where I think the offense could have been more efficient, could have been better, and as I already pointed out, settling for field goals inside of 30 yards never ideal. The stalling out in the red zone always a problem. But I think the defense more than the offense is really what you look at and say, hey, that's where the improvement needs to come if you're going to take a step forward. The offense was good enough for most of the season. They weren't good enough in spots. They definitely weren't good enough against Atlanta. And that score looks lopsided, but really it was the offense not being able to generate anything that didn't allow them to really stay in the game. And there's been stretches here and there where the offense just wasn't good enough. But I think you look more on the defensive side to where the issues have been for this Raiders team. But yeah, big game coming up, I think, in a lot of areas for evaluation for this team going forward. They go to Denver. Obviously, the playoffs are out of the picture. This is a time to look and say, hey, if you're the coaching staff, if you're the front office of the Raiders, what exactly do you have on the roster? Who do you want to make sure you keep around? Who do you think is expendable? Who do you say, okay, you're ready to move on from? A lot of that will be determined this week. I think you would expect to see some of the younger players get even more reps than usual, um, and just put them out there and put them in situations, and especially the fringe of the roster guys, the backups, the guys that are you know kind of fighting to keep their NFL careers going. You want to see those guys out on the field, and you want to see what they've got. Um, and I see Sebastian says, let's get that W on Sunday and finish the season on a positive note. There's something to that for sure. But to me, it's a valuation. And John Gruden, kind of pushed that aside last week and said, "Hey, it's always evaluation time. It's always an evaluation period." I get that part of it. You're always seeing what you have with your team and watching your players, but I think especially this time of year, it's about, hey, listen, this is a business. It's a job interview essentially for next season. Are you going to keep those same guys around? Um, you know, what do you have? How much do you want these certain guys to stay in the program, stay in the organization, and keep going forward? And how many guys do you say, okay, that guy is a guy that might not be buying in, might not be ready, might not be in our equation for next year? And I think that's what this game is about. I would, and I've talked about this before, but I would say absolutely. You go, and actually, that's a great question there that I'll tie into this. But I would say I don't see a reason for Derek Carr to be starting this week, and they've already announced that Derek Carr will start. I asked John Gruden that on Monday. If you guys were watching the call, I said, "Who's starting at quarterback?" I would say it should be Marcus Mariota, and I know our columnist Ed Grady made the case Mariota should start the last two games. I think it's for sure the last game because you know what you have in Derek Carr. Everybody understands what you have in Carr. He's been here 7 years. He's been in the system for 3 years. He had a really really good season, but I think you know what you're going to do with him. And is it possible that they move on from Carr? Yeah, it's possible, but I think they've already made up their mind one way or the other. But what about Mariota? If Carr was to move on, is Mariota the guy that you want as your starter? I don't think you know that yet. You saw him in one game, but that was a team that wasn't prepared for him. Um, I would say you go to Mariota, let him play, just to make that determination of what you have. Do you need to find a backup quarterback, or are you comfortable with him? Do you put him out there for him to have a great game, and then maybe somebody offers you a pick for him? If you don't want him with your team next year, maybe he's worth something to somebody. But I think you just need to play him on the field. There's far too many positives from playing him than negatives, and I don't know what you gain from playing Derek Carr, who you know everything you need to know about. That's what I would say. And then to tie it into why didn't the question here from ECG? Why didn't Gruden use more Ruggs, Edwards, and Moreau? Well, Moreau was hurt for a while, but Moreau is the one that really jumps out to me there. They had a lot of snaps, a lot of plays for Jason Witten this year, which really surprised me. Like I thought he was coming in more as a mentor, and I don't think you can fault anything of what he has done working with Darren Waller, working with the community. He has been everything that you wanted a veteran like Jason Witten to be, future Hall of Famer to be when you bring him in at this stage of his career for sure. But he got a lot of snaps, which that part of it surprised me. He was effective at times, didn't do a whole lot after his catches. It was, hey, go get open for 4 yards. We need to throw it to you, and you'll get a catch, and maybe move the chains, a couple near the goal line. Those are all good. But Foster Moreau, I think, is a guy with a ton of talent, a ton of upside. I would have given a lot of Jason Witten's reps to Foster Moreau, but again, he wasn't fully ready for a lot of the season. But yeah, that was one that really jumped out to me to answer your question. And as far as Ruggs and Edwards, I think they want to use him. I think they've wanted to try to get him involved, and I think Henry Ruggs has been impactful even when he doesn't get the ball. Henry Ruggs has definitely, if you watch the game films, like there's a lot of attention on Henry Ruggs, and that helps the rest of the offense. So Henry Ruggs has been, I don't want to use the word decoy, but I will. I mean, it's not because it's not that simple. He's not being used as a decoy. He's actually being used as part of the offense, but he draws so much defensive attention that he hasn't been able to find his target share really. But he has opened things up for other players to be able to do a lot of damage. I think a lot of what Nelson Aguilar has done has been because of the attention on Henry Ruggs, and Nelson Aguilar has been great for the Raiders this year. Plus, Henry Ruggs hasn't always been out there, as John Gruden said, had injuries, had COVID. Um, that best availability or best ability is availability hasn't always been the case there for Henry Ruggs and Brian Edwards, kind of along the same lines. Man, I think he has a ton of talent. You watch him on the practice field when we were allowed to, what he can do. He's so big, so physical, so talented. I think he was kind of a steal in the draft, but the production just hasn't been there yet. I think it will be. Maybe there was just an adjustment period. He was injured at the end of his college career, injured a little bit this year as well. So when he's fully healthy, I think with an offseason to develop with the Raiders, I think that there is a very bright future for Brian Edwards, but obviously a disappointing rookie season for somebody with that much talent. Um, Speaking of Aguilar, what's the Raiders' priority level of bringing him back in 2021? That is going to be a big story, I think, to me in the offseason. Uh, he's been so productive and so effective and so important as a receiver this season. Um, I would think they'd want him in the mix, but as we've talked about, look at the rest of the guys there. You obviously want Henry Ruggs to take on a bigger role. You want Brian Edwards to step up and be a more important player. Obviously, you've got Hunter Renfrow in the slot, who's been very good. I think you'd want Nelson Aguilar. I think Zay Jones might be a guy who they expect a little bit more of in terms of production this year, but he's been okay at times. Um, I do believe they want Nelson Aguilar back, but it's going to be, they're going to have to examine a lot of different areas. And I don't know how much they want to invest offensively either, because they have to focus almost entirely on the defense this offseason. And I know people love the offensive players and they love the splashy acquisitions and the splashy signings and bringing guys like that back and keeping the offense together. And that's great. But the investment has to come on on the defensive side this year, and that could be at the expense of some of the offensive players. So that's something to watch as well. Uh, from Mexico and going to the Raiders, how defensive should the Raiders hire in free agency? So where should they go on the defensive side? I think this is the priority, the focus. I think the draft is going to be invested very, very heavily on the defensive side. Um, but one of the issues that the Raiders have, and listen, they've shown an ability to just cut bait. Like Lynn Bowden is an example. Hey, you picked him in the third round, move on. For whatever reason, they didn't feel comfortable with him going into the season, and they traded him. So I don't think that it's completely crazy to think that some of the younger players that the Raiders were brought in that they would be willing to part ways with and try to reform the defense a little bit. But I think you've got building blocks in guys like Abram and Arnett and Trayvon Mullen, guys that you've drafted that you've invested in that you're going to want to try to build around. You just want to try to make them better instead of moving on or doing something differently there. So I think that they're going to bring in the most important acquisition of on the defensive side is going to be the defensive coordinator, and Rod Marinelli is making um, a good case. I thought the defense looked good for 3 quarters until they had Ryan Fitzpatrick, which they really weren't prepared for. So Rod Marinelli is making a case. If Raheem Morris, who is the interim coach in Atlanta, does not get a job, he does not get a head coaching job. To me, he's the number one target in terms of defensive coordinators. That would have been my hire from the beginning. That would have been my focus if I was running this organization. So and he's got a very good relationship with John Gruden, and obviously Raiders fans saw what Raheem Morris's team did to the Raiders a few weeks ago. That would be the focus to me, but he could get a head coaching job, so we'll see what happens there. But I think that's going to be the biggest acquisition in terms of what they do in the offseason defensively is getting a coordinator in who can change things up a little bit, work with some of the younger players, put them in better positions to succeed. You know, that part of it is kind of underrated, like the putting guys in the right positions thing. Sometimes you say, well, that guy's no good. Sometimes maybe they are good. They're just not in the right spots. Jonathan Abram is a guy who has really struggled in coverage. But when they get him close to the line of scrimmage and just say, hey, go play, go get the quarterback, go get the ball carrier, just go run and make a play, he's been more effective in that regard. So it's about putting guys in positions to succeed sometimes. And if you've got Abram in coverage all the time, that's a place where he's not really succeeding. But if you get him around the ball, get him around the line of scrimmage, he has been a little bit more effective in time. So those are the kind of things to think about in terms of bringing in a coordinator. You can get better just by getting a coordinator that'll put guys in the right positions, and that I think is what the Raiders will be looking for. But certainly they'll invest heavily in the draft on the defensive side, and they will be looking at some of the available players out there in free agency as well for sure. And that next week, I know we have a bunch of stuff planned in terms of just looking ahead to the offseason, potential free agent targets, that sort of thing. So make sure you check that up. Any chance Gruden will bring in Wade Phillips? Yeah, I think there's a chance for sure. Wade Phillips wants the job. I know that for certain. And he's been very effective as a defensive coordinator. We know that he's worked with some of the guys on the defensive staff already. It would make some sense. But like I said, I think Raheem Morris would be my number one target. You might not get him because he might get a head coaching job. You might want to go somewhere else as a defensive coordinator, but that would be my target. And I think Wade Phillips would be a fantastic candidate as well. Outside of Gruden, why has his team struggled to field an effective defense for about 20 years? And then somebody said maybe 30. There's been spots here and there where the defense is okay, but you're right. It's been an issue. And if you just look at the I know they've invested draft capital on the defensive side, and they brought in linebackers like Corey Littleton and Nick Witkowski this year. But it's clear that they're much more heavily invested on the offensive side. Obviously, you trade Khalil Mack out a couple of years ago to get some draft picks. That could have been a foundational player for the defense. But listen, I think they understand that they need to invest on that side of the ball. So hopefully, your fears or your concerns about the last 20 or 30 years will be addressed by the team this offseason. I thought there was something else on there. Should we have a look at Allen Robinson to replace Tyrell Williams? Um, it's complicated. Listen, as I just said, the defensive side is where they're really going to need to make a lot of investments. I don't think you need to make many splashes on offense to improve this team. But Allen Robinson is really, really, really good. He's really good, and he's the type of player on offense like what you thought if you're the Raiders organization, what you thought you were getting with Antonio Brown in terms of talent and the ability to be a game changer on offense, you would be getting an Allen Robinson without the baggage. So, yeah, I think it's somebody to look at. It's somebody to look for and say, hey, listen, what are the chances? What kind of deal could you do to bring them in? But you can't get too invested on the offensive side. I just think it'd be a mistake to continue to throw money at offense when the defense is in so much need of being fixed. And we just got a Mariota with a bunch of exclamation marks, and that is, I think, in regards to him potentially starting. Like I said, I'm not making the case that he should be the starting quarterback. I just think he should start this week and get a look at him. Just see what you got. You know what you have in Derek Carr. Everybody does. Very, very good player. Very good quarterback, having a great season. Like, but that's what it is. He's been really good. So, but what do you know about Marcus Mariota? Not enough. So when you have to make decisions in the offseason, you need to see how they are on the field. And I would say to let Mariota go. And we'll wrap this up here with one of these last questions. Victor Bowker said should go all defense and draft, maybe O lineman. That is actually a really, really good point because one of the things that we look at with this team is, hey, the offensive line's been really good for a couple of years. They've been a stalwart. Now this year there was a lot of injuries, a lot of guys not available at times, and there was times where it wasn't great. There was a stretch there where they couldn't run the ball at all. We know that, but the offensive line has been consistent for a while. It's been really one of the strengths since Gruden returned. But look at the ages of those guys. They are getting really old. And I know they tried to invest a little bit with John Simpson. He wasn't really ready in the draft. They went for him, and he's played here and there and had some decent moments, but been overwhelmed a little bit. So I do think that you need to start looking at that area. You got some younger guys there too that are on the rise. And Colton Miller, I thought, has had a really good season. He's young. Um, Brandon Parker's been pretty good. So you've got the replacements maybe there in waiting, but you do have to continue to solidify your young guys on the offensive line. So a good point there as well. I think we're going to wrap up. But you guys have questions here. So do you think Carr feared losing his job if Mariota had a good game against Miami and got the win? Yeah, but that's not a knock on him either. I think everybody that's ever been a professional athlete, I mean, outside of, you know, there's a couple, I guess, that wouldn't be. But yeah, I think there's always guys, and especially, Derek Carr has had to listen to this every season. He's had to listen to who's the next guy, who's coming in. And we've been, I've been guilty of this and speculating on who could potentially replace him and what they could do in his place. Last year it was the Tom Brady talk. There's been talk of other guys too. So yeah, I mean, I get why a player like Derek Carr would be concerned about that sort of thing. Hey, if I don't play and Marcus Mariota is unbelievable and wins the last 2 games of the season, even potentially sneaks into the playoffs, what happens to my job? I think it's fair that Derek Carr may have thought that way. I don't think that's unfair, and I don't think it's like crazy on his part. I think that's fair. But yeah, I do think that was part of the concern of why he wanted to play, and probably should be. I think that all players probably have that healthy thought in their head that's kind of driving them and keeping them competitive in a lot of ways. And let's see. All right. Well, if the Raiders did decide to move on from Derek Carr, what would the trade value be? It's always fascinating to see what the value of guys is. It's never as high as you think it is for different guys. It's tough to make trades because mostly when you're making a trade, if you're trading a player, especially a starting player, it's for a reason, and teams will look and say, "Well, why would I give up that much if you're moving on for a reason from this guy?" So I don't know what the trade value would be. Um, I think I think they'd get they'd get good value in the draft. I think for him, but not as much as you might think. Uh, and it just depends, what kind of a market there is. If there's a bunch of teams vying for him, then maybe you do get a really good deal for Derek Carr. But I don't know that that's going to be the case anyway, so I wouldn't be too worried about it at this point. But anything is possible in the offseason, and that's what we'll get you ready for. After this week, Sunday in Denver, of course, we'll have all the coverage of that game, Broncos Raiders, at Vegas Nation through the Vegas Nation app. Make sure you get that. And make sure you follow myself, Vinny Bonsignor, Heidi Fan, on Twitter, and Vegas Nation. So make sure you do all that and get you up to date on what's going on with the team in Denver. And then, of course, off-season coverage starts Tuesday, next Tuesday, in the paper and on the website. Start looking for all that off-season coverage. What are they going to do? What are their targets going to be in free agency? What are they going to do in the draft? Who is going to be the defensive coordinator? It's a big question for the offseason. For all of that and so much more with all of our gear and coverage. Thank you guys so much. Great questions. Really appreciate it today. And I'll be back with you. Somebody will be here next week probably. And then throughout the offseason, we'll probably jump in and answer your questions as well. But thank you guys because that was awesome. A lot of really good questions. Talk to you guys again really soon.